Hello there, and welcome to Speaking of Our Words, radio programming that brings you the wide range of voices, stories, and forms of local writers, and offering you some insight into their creative process. My name is Dave Gourdoux. I'm a member of the Kenosha Writers Guild, and I am your host. We've got a pretty sparse collection of people here. So it's just myself and Bob Katzman and our engineer, Troy McDonald. We'll consider this a very intimate setting today. How's that sound? First thing, though, I've got a couple pieces from our regular contributor, Richard Bell, who was obviously in the holiday spirit when he submitted these. Two pieces here. I'll read these, and we'll go from there. So the first one is called A Christmas Carol with Apologies to Charles Dickens, by Richard Bell, from his book Life Seemed Good, But. So here goes. Marley was dead to begin with. There is no doubt whatever about that. Ebenezer Scrooge hurried home through the frosty air after severely chastising his clerk and went up to his chambers. It had been exactly 7 years ago tonight, Christmas Eve, when Marley had bit the big one. As Scrooge sat eating cold potato stew, the memory of his ex-partner had long since faded from the stage of his mind. Then, without warning, Marley's ghost stepped through the closed hallway door, accompanied by a loud blast of trumpets and bassoons. "Marley, what are those heavy chains and lockboxes you wear?" he inquired of this ghostly apparition. Marley moaned in a melancholy monotone. "These are the chains I forged in life, and yours were this long 7 years ago tonight. Your chain is now ponderous indeed." "That's your opinion," exclaimed Scrooge, unsure of his own senses. "Why have you come here? For money?" "To give you warning. This very evening you will be visited by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. Heed their lessons that you may escape my forsaken fate," replied the spirit, which then floated out the window but crashed to the ground below, leaving behind kind of a pine smell. "Bah, humbug!" Scrooge threw his empty bowl into the smoldering fireplace and went to bed. As the hour struck 1, a strangely glowing golden retriever materialized at the foot of Scrooge's bed and implored him to rise and follow for visions of Christmas past. But Scrooge pulled the heavy covers over his head and refused to budge. After 20 minutes of continual barking and whining, the ghostly dog disappeared. When the next hour struck, a bearded gnome in a tall yellow hat arrived and offered to show Scrooge scenes of Christmas present, as well as how to save money and travel. The stubborn old miser refused, of course. After 20 minutes of pleading, cajoling, and bad puns, this phantom likewise vanished. The third hour struck, and the final spirit appeared. It was a giant, gloomy blackbird, and it beckoned the old cheapskate to follow for a glimpse of Christmas future. Ebenezer pulled the covers over his head to pretend he wasn't there, but the huge bird grabbed him by the ankle and yanked him out of bed. It dragged Scrooge down the stairs, bumping his balding noggin on each step. Scrooge was flown out to a neglected cemetery, to a grave whose crumbling gray headstone bore the cheaply chiseled name of Ebenezer Scrooge. Old Scrooge trembled greatly and implored the bird for mercy, asking if changing his ways would cancel out this bitter end. The bird blinked several times, then squawked and flew away, and Scrooge wept like a spoiled little schoolgirl. The next morning, Scrooge awoke in his own bed. Still unsure of himself, he opened his window and asked the passing youth what day it was. It was Christmas. "Bah, humbug!" Ebenezer brought the prized goose and gorged himself on it, then threw the remains in the garbage to show his contempt for the blackbird. The next morning, when his clerk, Bob, came in late, he was fired. As a result, Tiny Tim never recovered his health, and he and his pet rabbit, Fluffy, both died a year later from chronic pervasive disorder complicated by a bunny virus. Ebenezer, the cheap chiseler, finally went down to the vile dust from whence he sprung, unwept, unhonored, and unsung. Today he wanders the earth as a scrawny, sorrowful spirit dragging a humongous iron chain, unable to intercede for good in human affairs, which is now his heart's only desire. Therefore, if the spirits visit you this evening, be sure to get up when the dog barks. So that was Richard's take on a holiday classic. And this is a second one from Richard Bell. I think this may have been read on the show once before, but it's an oldie. It's a goodie, so it's very short. It's called Meeting Santa by Richard Bell from his book Life Seemed Good, But. There have been many movies about Santa Claus, and I think I've seen them all. From this, I've learned that he can and will disguise himself as different-looking Santas to confuse the kiddies. Since I have a long-standing complaint, I thought it was about time I talked to Santa again. As I cannot afford a trip to the North Pole where he is well hidden, I could either surprise him if he visits my house or find him at the local mall. Obviously, the latter would be the most practical, so I waited outside the mall late one night to greet him as he left, and before he could take off in a sleigh. The exchange went something like the following. "Hey, Santa," I yelled in a stern voice, seeing him walk out. "Santa, I want a few words with you." I'm not sure why, but he pretended not to hear me, so I was persistent. "Santa," I yelled louder, walking after him. He walked even faster, but it wasn't hard to catch. As he could read my mind, he shouldn't have been worried. Santa can read everybody's mind. That's how he knows what to bring you. When I got him to stop, he told me he didn't have any money and would I please leave him alone. What's up with that? Maybe I should have shaved and worn nicer clothes before going out. Too late now. It's probably a good idea for the next time we chat, so he doesn't think I'm some sort of nut. I told him I only wanted to talk and made an effort to calm him down. "Santa, please explain why you didn't bring me a hovercraft when I was 10 years old. I seriously want to know." Simple question, right? He looked at the ground, slowly shaking his head, and didn't answer, so I continued. "Okay, since I have your undivided attention, I've always wondered, are the elves your children? Are they like mutants due to all the radiation at the North Pole? Is Mrs. Claus their only mother? No comment? Well, then may I ask why bad kids still get good presents? Also, tell me, are you required to do a background check to bring someone a gun, or can you skip that part?" His eyes got bigger at that last question, but he continued to pretend ignorance. When it became evident he was being rude to me on purpose, I got a little irritated. What kind of Santa is this? He wasn't behaving at all like he does in the movies. Perhaps I should just quit asking for stuff. After all, he hasn't brought me anything for over 30 years now, but he still owes me a frickin' hovercraft. I turned to glare at some people walking by, staring at me like I was some kind of big idiot, and as I did, Santa bolted toward a nearby car with keys in hand. Hey, jolly boy, not so fast," I shouted, but he had locked himself in and was starting the engine, most likely to drive to his sleigh, which would be hidden nearby. I'd have thought Santa could afford a nicer car than that old beater, but it's probably part of his disguise. I hope the sleigh is in better shape. As he sped away, he shouted something and waved a finger at me, probably to indicate I'm number one on his list now. Well, good luck, Santa. I hope you make it back to the North Pole safely. Remember, you still owe me a hovercraft, okay? Don't rip my heart out again, okay? That was the typical twisted Richard Bell. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words. Okay, our first reader today is Robert Katzman. Bob Katzman? Are you Robert or Bob?
Depends on who I'm with. To my friends, I'm Bob. So I'm Bob to you.
Okay, he's Bob to me and
to Troy.
And then Troy, all right. So,
not to the government.
So what have you got for us today, Bob?
Well, I brought three things, and I'm going to talk a little bit about them. The first one is unusual because it's overtly political, which I've never done before. Because if you've owned stores all your life, you better not express a political opinion or you're going to lose half your customers. And the other two are related to what today is. So why don't I read the first one and then introduce the other ones.
The first
and
one
today is December 20th, and it's a special day, and I'll explain that in a minute.
Okay, the first one is usually a good place to start, so let's do the first one first.
Okay. What will it take to get you to rage? There are through time men who lust to rule. They only see others as less than them, other men's pride a footstool to step on, especially men too terrified to resist. Mostly men who will always say, well, what can I do? You don't understand. Mortgage, kids, college, wife, car, and life, all at the mercy of the big man. It is the cowards who allow women to be defiled. It is cowards who allow girls to be treated as whores. The big man has his needs, his pleasures. No matter what, you gotta keep the big man quiet. Old people fear somehow losing their checks, like the big man can take it away. Black, brown, and fearful immigrants are kept in their place because the big man holds all the cards. But only if everyone's spine's been ripped out. Only if timid senators desperately grasp their seats. The big man knows how much status means and toys with scattering their power to the wind. When party means more than what kind of country this is, when good men and strong women fear to resist his evil, when the big man decides what's moral and not, then we deserve to fear what we'll see in the mirror. Most of us live here because our grandparents wanted to give us a chance. This was supposed to be the last best place to be free to be. So many depend on us still believing in ourselves, that we are still brave, that no place, no power, and no man can diminish the United States. Let the good people in government find the courage to rise up. There is a law they can use, the 25th Amendment, and throw the son of a bitch out of his playpen. The worst they can do to him is take away his power. Men, women, and all of the colors that we are together, stop allowing the big man to represent what we are to the world. Throw the bum out. Throw the bum out. We have it within us to throw the bum out and let him learn how little he really is. Do it.
Thank you. That's very powerful. The thing that bothers me about all this is that it's the people who say it's just politics, as if this was normal. There's nothing normal about what's going on now.
No.
We
know what scraping the bottom feels like.
Yeah.
There's nothing. I'm 67. I've never experienced this level of nobody and nothing. It makes the bad presidents look good. This is very disturbing.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's disturbing enough for me to break my virginity in terms of writing something political. That's why I did it. Keeping silent is a crime if you have the slightest possibility of influencing anyone.
Well, that was very, very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
What do you got next?
Today is December 20th. It is the 49th anniversary of when I had cancer surgery in 1968 and survived it. And I call it Anything Can Happen Day because across my life, I think about 6 different things have happened. 3 of them, bad, and 3 of them better. And my attitude toward the day is that if nothing happens on December 20th, I'm ahead. In 2003, on today, I received a fax informing me that I was going to have brain surgery. So that kind of, it's not just, stubbing your toe. It's bad. It's 3:15. I'm doing all right. But I found out this morning that a blind date that I made, a date with this woman that I know a little bit, because my wife died in May and her husband died in April. And I thought, why should we be alone separately and miserable when we can be miserable together? My wife Joyce and I always went out on December 30th because there was no traffic. You go anywhere, movies, plays, you get a good seat. So I told her it's not a date. We're just keeping each other company. And she said, fine, 10 days ago. And then today she sent a note to me saying, I can't do it. I'm not ready to do it. I can't do it. And I wrote her a nice response, being sympathetic and telling her, I understand, it's okay, which it wasn't. And I thought about it and said, are you going to really put up with this? It's December 20th. You could possibly do something. And I sent a note to 14 of my friends, 9 men and 5 women, telling them that I wanted to have a blind date to go out on December 30th because I didn't want to be alone. And almost immediately, one of my friends responded. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm assuming there'll possibly be a happy ending to this December 20th. So I take the day seriously.
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen. Yeah. All right. These two next poems, which are relatively short, and one is surreal, is about the fact that I've had 38 operations, and it doesn't make any sense, and most people don't understand me the first time I say it. And so I wrote something on June 20th, 2013, called Nearly 3 Dozen. This is it. My surgeries, nearly 3 dozen, have given me insight into what's important, why friends matter, what not to put up with, why a person should speak up when a wrong thing is happening, the necessity of finding and keeping love. Of equal importance, not to be too busy to cuddle my dogs and make them feel secure because they need it. So in a way, I'm blessed. Blessed with understanding, maybe more so than others who consider themselves more fortunate than I am, but whose scars may not be so visible, nor so beneficial. Some curse the rainy day, a ball game canceled, a ruined transmission, a failing grade, a missed train or plane, a promotion denied, some rue gray hair or losing it, wrinkles spreading like a parched lake bed, a missed putt, insufficient popularity, lack of recognition, calls unreturned, journeys not taken, missed opportunity. I know what a good day is. How many people actually know what a good day is? A good day involves neither scalpels nor stitches. With such an enlightened awareness, does not the sun shine more brightly for me, a soft wind more caressing, an embrace more fulfilling? I am not scarred. I am blessed, and also blessed to know it. So.
Very nice.
That was when I was up to 35, I think. So this is 3 more later, and I just came back from Israel following the death of my wife, and that's a separate thing. But I had this moment at the Western Wall, which is the most famous symbol of Judaism in Israel. It's the remaining part of the second temple destroyed in 70 AD by the Romans. And you'll see its continuity. Pleading with fate in Jerusalem. I tilted my head to the Western Wall, trying to summon the words, conjuring up fate to listen to me, surrendering to that which can't be seen, but regardless, nevertheless, heard. Why do you keep doing this? You keep taking away. You keep taking so many away. No one left to call and say, do you remember this perilous time when we traveled here, when we stood our ground there, sharing our consequences together, then holding hands across the miles? And so much cutting. The cutting never ends. Nearly 40 surgeries. I am more scarred than flesh. I don't understand. There must be a reason to it. No reason will lead to madness. I pressed my uncertain face against ancient sand-colored stone blocks. Cool against my skin, hard against my skin, seeking to make a connection, praying that the Western Wall of the Roman-destroyed temple was not a barrier, but a portal. Thousands were assembled randomly around me, some entirely in black, tall hats and prayer shawls, long curls running down their cheeks, believing they were closer to God than I was. Except I think arrogance repels our deity. I believe he sees beneath the trappings, naked bodies all the same at Auschwitz. The loud sound of prayers dimmed. I felt an eerie presence, there and not there, maybe entirely within me, appearing before my mind's eye, preparing to respond. Nothingness had a shape. A voice without sound spoke to me, warm and distant, cold with power, something unearthly pausing, something of unfathomable dimensions, cosmic and final. I imagined a shroud, A hooded face, lost in shadow, floating and immovable, focused on my pain, granting me reason, reconsidering the original decision, a lifetime of silence. A voice said, long, long ago, many were just like you, born then bathed in radiation, fated to die so young. Among the other many millions who die each day, a decision was considered, compensation for consequences. You were innocent, you were spared, but only just so. You were not more deserving. You were chosen at random. The poisoned others were worth no less than you. The universe is demanding. Fate, myself, was assigned to you. Your surgeries would continue, but you would not die. Decade by decade, through intense and repeating pain, you would acquire understanding. You would acquire compassion. You would realize responsibility. You would transmit hope. And your gift was time. I listened to the silent sound, no longer aware of the wall, rushing to comprehend, frightened I couldn't, reaching to grab the words close to my chest, trying to hold onto air, trying to understand, but I pleaded with fate. You took so many from me, my grandparents, my aunts, my uncles, my parents, my cousins, my sister, my wife. You left me alone without memory. The loneliness is drowning me. Why did they all have to die? Then fate unexpectedly replied. I never assumed I was to be answered, a speck in time, not deserving, something too intangible to hold on to. And fate replied, you think death is a punishment? You think life is a reward? One second. I'm going to repeat it. And fate replied, you think death is a punishment? You think life is a reward? Cannot death be a release? Cannot death be kindness? Would you surrender your life not knowing what few ever know? That you can give comfort to so many. That no matter how awful another's life may be, yours will always be worse. And they will see they've been spared. What might have come to them. Having and losing were part of your greater plan. You would learn along the way. You could give comfort in person. Merely by showing up at a bedside, you will give comfort for centuries, learning what you are, now understanding, and writing it down. Because you are recording meaning. Meaning. Your responsibility is to offer uncomplicated hope, and that is why you have been spared, for now. I stopped still in my wondering. I stared at fate, who was not unkind, but whom I felt was moving on. There was warmth. There was purpose. There was an embrace, and my fear dissolved. Fate then said, voice trailing behind him, moving away somewhere from me, you have your children, you have grandchildren, perhaps another wife. Not for me to say, but I could feel a smile in that. You can leave your words for them. You still have many words to write before you join the others. One day they too will understand, maybe even why you were chosen, and that it wasn't random indifference, but a way of seeking forgiveness from the one who need not forgive, from so many who died so young. Don't be in a hurry yourself. The next place is forever, when it is decided that time will say to death for fate to come back for you. And then I understood. Like a sunrise in my mind, shedding my long familiar fear that fate was time, was death, and that either together or separate, none of them, was cruel.
Powerful stuff, Bob.
What?
Powerful stuff.
Yeah, I didn't know that it would do this. I wrapped up truth with the surreal. I wanted to find a way to express something unimaginable, because it is unimaginable. And how many people can conceive of having 38 operations? And my last one was 11 days ago. I guess when you're a writer, you try to seek meaning. And so I think I wrote a prayer. I'm not sure how others will receive it, and I can't avoid responding emotionally because it's emotion that wrote it.
Mm.
And ahead of me is a void. 42 years of marriage and then no one now. So, yep. You want to ask me something?
I'm kind of speechless.
That's how I felt.
Very powerful. I liked the part where he said death is not a punishment, I think it was.
I didn't realize that would affect other people. Someone read it. I can't think of it. But they said that was the part that meant the most to them. You never know.
Yeah.
The 5 lines. And fate replied, you think death is a punishment? You think life is a reward? Cannot death be a release? Cannot death be kindness? And it made me realize that sometimes you can capture something in a few words that is cosmic. And I think the reason writers write is for that moment to happen if they're going to read things out loud and not just put things in a drawer.
Mm-hmm.
That if there's a willingness to be embarrassed by pain and emotion, then people can hear you read things in your own voice, but they can also read them in the future and have a different voice in their head.
Well, it's the only open wounds you have aren't necessarily from the surgeries, are they?
Well, I have 4 of them at the moment, but no, the wounds in me are many Grand Canyons. They're scattered.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want.
I just thought the imagery you had of your surgeries, and
psychologically,
and then the opening yourself up emotionally.
You know, I came from hell. I have a reserve department in hell. Anytime I want to go there, and it's important that I write, because every so often I write something that gives voice to people who can't express horror in their own lives. So I don't know how much I've figured out, but I think I'm getting closer to understanding. Maybe death is a reward. You learn everything and then you're free. Do you want me to see if I can read this?
Sure.
Place your bets. Okay, this is okay. Vad Yashem. Vad Yashem is a Holocaust memorial in Israel. There is a separate structure for the 1.5 million children that were killed, and it is otherworldly. I went there in the year 2000, never again since then. And after I was there, I immediately went over to a security guard, asked him to give me some paper and a pen, and I sat there in the middle of a lobby with hundreds of people going in and out, and I wrote this. I didn't want to lose it. So, Vad Yashem, killing 1 million children. I didn't want to come here. I've been here before. I know what's awaiting me. So much older now. I need to feel it again, the jolt of horror, to remind myself I am still here. We are still here. I wander past exhibits. I know all of it so well, imprinted on my soul like tattoos on their arms. Nazis, swastikas, Sieg Heil, blame it on the Jews, the rise to power, conquering Europe. Ghettos sealed off, railroad cattle cars, striped, ragged clothes, empty-eyed skeletons. But no one had any idea about this. Killing millions not so easy to conceal, unless the millions didn't matter. My people are from Poland and Lithuania. To us, Jews, my people are Galicianers and Litvaks. All who couldn't escape, their souls are here. I wonder if any of my children have any of their faces. Drifting from pictures of smoking crematoriums inevitably brings me to the Children's Memorial. Grasping the heavy door's handle, I enter blackness. Overwhelming blackness. Above me, below me, enveloping me, 1 million twinkling lights for 1 million slaughtered children. I feel faint, disoriented, reaching for an invisible support. My mind swoons. I feel the breath of them flowing through me. I feel their spilt blood flowing through me. I know them. I know about beaten children. I know a beaten child. For years and years, no one came to save me, and something died inside. I came to connect with their hopelessness. I came to feel the slashing pain. I came to feel anything. I prayed to their unavailable God. Where were you when they needed you? I prayed to my fabricated God. Where were you when I needed you? And I slumped to the floor, hidden in the blackness, soaked in my tears. No hero ever came. I got what I came for. I am destroyed.
Oh, very powerful again.
Ooh.
There's nothing more unimaginable than cruelty to children. Nothing in this world more horrible.
I know I won't go back to Israel anymore. I decided it was for her, but this was to reignite the part of me that was beaten to death. And when I went to this place, that's what I wanted. I wanted to ignite the electricity that reminds you you're alive, except the consequences are reliving it 9 years in a flash. And what I described, unfortunately, wasn't a metaphor. It was what I experienced.
Very effective, very powerful. Well, thank you, Bob.
Thank you for letting me read it.
No problem. You are listening to Speaking of Our Words. Okay, you're listening to Speaking of Our Words. Next up is me, Dave Gourdoux, for whatever that's worth. And I'm going to read something today that I wrote several years ago, kind of seasonal, and that takes place in the wintertime and snow is involved. It's called Melting Diamonds and the Great Blue Bus in the Sky. And this is a memoir. So here goes. There used to be an old blue school bus that ran from the parking lot of the A&P grocery store in Ladysmith to the Norco window factory in Hawkins every day. I'd walk the 4 blocks from my apartment on the 3rd floor of the Girard Hotel to the bus, and for a while I'd be joined by Jack Anderson, a big, burly man about 60 years old with a scraggly white beard, who worked in the same department at Norco that I worked in. Jack worked alongside the slightly older and famously cantankerous Conrad Stonke, one of the great characters I've ever had the pleasure of having known. Conrad was at the time in his early 60s, a rather short man of medium build, whose thinning hair turned pure white with age. Every day Conrad wore the same olive green work uniform, work pants and shirts, and had an olive green colored cap that covered the thinning white hair on top of his head. He also sported a little pure white goatee that for special occasions he would dye an appropriate color. To celebrate his Irish ancestry, every year on St. Patrick's Day, he'd show up with his white goatee colored green. On the 4th of July, streaks of red and blue would be added to the natural white for a stirring patriotic salute. He was ornery and complained about everything, but he also had a sense of humor, and when he laughed, he would clench both of his fists and hold them at his thighs, stand on his tippy toes, and emit a high-pitched tee-hee-hee sound. It never failed. You'd get a laugh out of him, and his automatic reflexive action would be to clench his fists, stand on his tippy toes, and make tee-hee-hee sounds. Conrad and Jack would take panes of glass and stack them on top of the aluminum frames I and my work partner, the 45-year-old bachelor Lou Reed, were responsible for. Lou would fill the individual aluminum spacers with silicate. I would snap them together into wobbly rectangles and store them in groups of about 30 of the same dimensions in the hot room, where Conrad and Jack would take them and stack them on the tables we had covered and taped with construction paper earlier that morning, inserting the freshly cut and clean pieces of glass that they'd take off of rollers that were fed from the outside room by another member of our crew, Roger Arndt. Finally, the stacks of glass and aluminum spacers that were so carefully prepared by Conrad and Jack would be wheeled to the middle of the room, where their sides would be covered by a fresh coat of goop, some form of mysterious thick adhesive material that my friend Jeff Severson would whip up from the strange goop-making machine that stood in the center of our small room and apply to the stacks of windows of the cardboard trowel. When finished, Jeff would wheel the table with the gooped-up stacks of glass outside of our temperature-controlled room to the larger factory that sat outside, where the goop would dry. Later, someone, the goop fairy perhaps, would come by with a utility knife and cut through the goop, revealing the separate insulated aluminum spacer-bound panes of glass that would be incorporated into wooden sashes to complete the transformation of raw material to window. We worked in a small room, me and Lou, Conrad and Jack, and Jeff, with Roger popping in between those to see what size of glass panes to pick up for washing and feeding through to Conrad and Jack next, together for 8 or 9 hours a day. During peak times, we'd do an additional 5 hours on Saturday morning, so we got to know each other pretty well. I, being the youngest and by far the most immature of the group, settled easily into the role of clown. I quickly mastered my job of snapping together the aluminum frames so that I could stay comfortably ahead of my work, leaving my mind free to explore ideas to convince the others, especially grumpy, cantankerous-old Conrad, that I was one sandwich short of a picnic. Amongst my favorite routines were 1. Getting angry at the stored boxes of metal spacers and going a few rounds with them, showing off my boxing skills, quickly throwing left jabs and lethal combinations and punching them until my knuckles literally bled. 2. Standing on top of the paper tables, flapping my arms and cawing like a crow at the top of my lungs. And 3, with Jeff and a visitor from an outside department, starting out with the bass vocals of the Beach Boys' Barbara Ann, jumping up on top of one of the wheeled tables and singing the high-pitched falsetto leads loudly as I could, all the while using the wheeled table as my surfboard, pretending to ride a big wave. I'd get puzzled smiles and head shakes from Lou Reed, and when I'd get the involuntary tippy-toed, clenched-fisted tee-hees from that old mule, Conrad's donkey, I knew I'd accomplished something. Exactly what, nobody knew, but it was undeniably something. I'd spent enough time with these guys that I'd gotten comfortable, maybe too comfortable, with them, and I wasn't afraid of showing off. I was living alone, very much alone at the time, and work provided on many days the only real contact I had with other human beings. After the misery that was high school, I had no desire to attend college and subject myself to more of the same. I was eager to experience a life without school and make money and buy things. After graduating high school, I got a job where everyone who couldn't get a job anywhere else got a job, the C&D duck processing plant in Franksville, Wisconsin, where I worked my way up to the illustrious position of lung sucker. With my handsome $4.33 per hour salary, I was able to buy my first car, a 1974 AMC Hornet, a green hatchback with yellow racing stripes on the side. I was also able to make enough money to purchase a stereo system and get a pretty impressive start to a record album collection. But it didn't take long for the job of sucking the lungs out of ducks. To be clear, we sucked them into these big vacuum guns, not our own lungs, to lose this luster. In mid-1977, a year after starting work at C&D, I grew restless. I was still living at home, still lonely, still not meeting any girls. I decided it was time for the next chapter in my life. I decided it was time to go out on my own. The only choice there was for such an adventure was to return to my ancestral homeland of northern Wisconsin. So it was that I moved into the Girard Hotel in Ladysmith, high in the banks of the Flambeau River. I had lived there on my own and worked at Norco for about a year by the time Jack Anderson came to join our little department. We hit it off right away. Whereas Conrad was an ornery old fart who found reason to complain in just about everything, Jack had a much more philosophical view of life. He was well-read and had a fast mind, and he had his own way of viewing things. He had raised 2 sons who were older than me, and, in 1978, had a young daughter about 4 or 5 years old. At the end of the workday, his wife, who was a bit younger than Jack, probably late 40s, would walk with his young daughter to meet the blue bus that we returned to Ladysmith on, and together the three of them would walk home. I remember that it never failed. Every day, the eyes of both his wife and young daughter would light up when Jack got off that bus, and they'd walk home together, the three of them, Jack walking that distinctive, lumbering walk of his, a picture of domestic bliss that never failed to put a smile on my face. Jack kind of took me under his wing. I may have been wearing my plight as the lonely young bachelor on my sleeve a little bit more than I'd like to admit, because I think Jack saw through the facade my clowning around all day tried to project and saw the loneliness underneath. He'd always take the time to have serious discussions with me, and we'd discuss current events and old movies and philosophy, as I picked up every now and then some of my brother Mike's college books and liked to pass myself off as knowing something about the subject. It turned out Jack had read many of the same books and was able, in his simple terms, to make me understand, for example, what Kant's categorical imperative was all about on a morning when the big blue bus chugged down Highway 8 to the Norco plant. Jack took enough pity on me to help me out on occasion. One morning, he handed me 2 army fatigue jackets that used to belong to his sons, plus an old black and white checkered winter coat, saying he had no further use for any of them and would like to see them come to some good. They were great. I wore them until they fell apart. I still have one of the army fatigue jackets. I did find in one of the pockets a letter from Jack's oldest son to his second son, saying how he was coming home on leave from the army soon, how he was looking forward to seeing his little brother, and how he knew a guy in Eau Claire they could get some good weed from. I never showed this letter to Jack. My favorite memory of Jack Anderson took place on a very dark morning in late November. We had to be on the blue bus by 6 o'clock a.m. About an hour earlier, it had started to snow, one of the first snowfalls of the season. It was cold out, no wind to speak of. It started with a few big snowflakes slowly and silently drifting from the sky, and then it started snowing heavier, still big flakes, silently dropping out of the low ceiling of night and into the halo of the minor avenue streetlights, like an invasion of miniature white paratroopers. The ground was just cold enough that the snowflakes started to stick, and they'd lie there on the sidewalks, glittering in the glow of the streetlights. I had gotten to the bus first that morning, and when Jack joined me a few minutes later, his eyes were wide with excitement. "Did you see that?" he asked. "What, the snow? Did you ever see such a beautiful sight?" "Yeah, those were big and pretty flakes, weren't they? They were diamonds, is what they were. They were diamonds, thousands of them at my feet, shining, and they were mine." I thought that's exactly what they looked like, illuminated in the glow of the streetlights. They glittered and sparkled just like diamonds. "I was a wealthy man there for a while," he said. "I was a wealthy man." I don't remember much else about the ride to work that morning, but I do remember, a couple of times throughout the day, he'd remind me, "I was a wealthy man there this morning with all those diamonds shining at my feet." Jack was right. He was a wealthy man that morning. I understood even then how rare a diamond Jack Anderson was. To see and appreciate the beauty that was there at that moment, on display just for him, as he lumbered his way up Minor Avenue, his lunchbox in his hand and his head at his feet, counting the diamonds that were his and his alone. Conrad Stronkley was roughly the same age as Jack, and I guarantee he wouldn't have seen the diamonds. Nor would Jeff Severson or other kids my age. The question was and remains, would I ever see them? With Jack having shared his poetic version of the miracle that was present in that moment with me, I like to think that I would see them. I've at least tried to look for the diamonds at my feet throughout the years, but no doubt I've missed most of the miracles that are constantly occurring every day. I know I have all too frequently worn the blinders of preoccupation as I made my way through the journey of each day, preoccupied with family issues, work issues, or lately, disease and fear. But through the years, I have revisited that early snowy morning hundreds of times and heard Jack describe what a wealthy man he was And each time I think how lucky I was to have been there and been the one he shared his wealth with. I have no idea whatever became of Jack Anderson. I have not seen or talked to him since I left Norco on Halloween 1979, more than 35 years ago. If he is still alive, he would now be in his 90s. I'm sure he has long since forgotten about the goofy 19-year-old who he shared a bus seat with for a few months. I'm sure he has long forgotten about the Army fatigue jackets and winter coat and wisdom he shared with me. But that doesn't change the fact that I'll never forget him and his lumbering walk. And if he has gone on to the great blue bus in the sky, I like to imagine that every year, when the first snowfall hits the early morning streetlights of Miner Avenue and Ladysmith, his ghost can be seen lumbering along with his lunchbox in his hands, counting the diamonds as they accumulate around his feet. And you're listening to Speaking of Our Words. This is Dave Gourdoux. I'm going to read one more short piece. I guess I'll call it My Temple of Air. So I wrote this about 3-4 months ago. So here goes. One of my favorite books is The Temple of Air, a collection of interwoven short stories by the Chicago writer Patricia Ann McNair. The book continues to have an impact on me because of its profoundly rich and deep sense of place. I'm finding that as I grow older, my relationship to places, whether it's where I come from, where I am, or where I might be going, is for some reason becoming more and more important to me. The stories in the Temple of Air all take place in the fictional and isolated small town of New Hope, Illinois, which bears an uncanny resemblance to the town I grew up in, Union Grove, Wisconsin. But it's not the greatness of the book or Miss McNair's evocative prose or the nuanced and substantive characters she draws that has me thinking about her book tonight, although that's where these things normally end up. Instead, it is quite literally that last word in her title, air. This is where things get a little bit weird and where I'm going to reveal what a real flake I am. But I swear, this is true and real, even though I know I can't adequately describe it, and I have no idea what, if anything, it means. About 2 years ago, I had triple bypass heart surgery. Although I was 99% blocked in one artery and about 90% in a couple of others, it'd be disingenuous to call it a near-death experience. But while it may not have been in the room with me, I think it's safe to say that death was in the neighborhood and was on his way in his big blue 1969 Impala, stuck at a light with his left turn signal on, waiting for the arrow to turn green. He was close enough for me to feel his presence more acutely than at any other time in my life. Fortunately, everything went well, and now the old ticker is just plugging along, and having missed his exit, Old Death is back on the outbound interstate. But here's the weird part, and I swear it's true. Ever since the operation, I've had brief moments, about 2 or 3 times a month, where I feel the air in a way I've never felt it before. Usually happens when I step outside. I feel its coldness or warmth. I smell it. I taste it, just like everybody else, just like everybody does, just like I always have, only stronger and deeper. It becomes overpowering. But it's more than that. It's very strange. When these moments occur, they establish a connection to something at some time in my past. Most of the time I can't name when or where it is, but I get the sense that it's connecting me to some point in my past, usually my childhood, unlocking a brief moment where the air felt exactly like it does at that precise time in the present. Usually the flashbacks triggered in these moments are vague and shapeless, and impossible to make out the connection, but I feel it, and I know it's just beyond my grasp. A couple of times they've been vivid enough to present to me, like a movie playing in my head, complete scenes. The most vivid of these flashbacks occurred just a couple of days ago, on a warm March day when I stepped outside to let the dogs out. Suddenly, I saw myself, 6 or 7 years old, on the front porch of our house in Indian Grove on a warm spring day. And I more than just saw myself. I saw the world through my young child eyes and body, and everything felt different, except for the air. The air felt the same. It was my portal into the past. And I walked through the screen door into the living room of my childhood, down the hallway, into the bedroom my brother Don and I shared. Don wasn't there. Our bunk beds along the near wall were empty. The plastic model of the Japanese Zero plane that Don had assembled hung from the light shade, suspended by a thread tied to its front and back that was looped over the shade. It was late afternoon, the pre-dusk shadows advancing across the room. My little bones ached, so I lay down on the bottom bunk and stared at the mattress spring of the top bunk above me. And then I was back, 50 years later, in the present. The title and final story in The Temple of Air is about an adolescent girl who is painfully neglected by her divorced and hopelessly shallow parents, and how she's finally able, for at least a brief moment, to literally rise above her circumstance. I was lucky enough to have no such hardships. My childhood was nothing if not idyllic. It never occurred to me that there were other people who suffered tremendous pain and anguish. I took my good fortune for granted and thought no more about it than I thought about the air I breathed. Tonight, I'm thinking that when my last story is told, when air is no longer available to me, I'll kneel before the aggregate of all the air I ever breathed in, and I'll rise above, but not too high, tethered to this world like a model airplane suspended from a sailing light.
Romantic.
Okay, you're listening to Speaking of Our Words. And we have time for an additional selection from Mr. Katzman. So, Bob, if you'd be so kind.
I'll get right to it, and I don't want to forget to mention I have a website with all of the things that you heard me read earlier. It's called Different Slants, like a slanted roof.com. And go there, look at it. Okay, this is not about, mostly it's not about death. It's about fire. Teaching Jericho about fire on Thanksgiving Day. We're walking on the beach collecting wood. Thanksgiving Day. Pieces of our family are gathering. First time without Grandma in his short life. And my long one. Her shadow follows us. He's 6 and doing his best. I'm 67 and want him to know about wood and fire and so much more. I think about time and that it's flowing too quickly. I tell him the lake washes up driftwood, so dry it will catch fire in a wink. He looks for it like a robin focused on a worm. I tell him the white branches are best to collect as we walk down the beach with a small wheelbarrow, filling it with bits and pieces of kindling. I told him kindling meant small pieces of wood, fire-starting sized wood, about the size of his fingers, like kindergarten meant small kids. Jericho nodded he understood. I told him that small branches were like his wrist. Bigger branches were thicker like his thin white arms. He looked at his fingers, wrist, and arm, taking inventory. He says little, tries hard to get it right. Grandpa told him he will burn whatever wood the boy finds. In a big fire tonight with real logs and maybe hot chocolate. He's 6, and this is serious motivation. It won't be for long, and he won't notice it passing. This is the year of first time everything without Grandma. As each of the holidays pass by, and her absence looms large in my severed existence, but to our small grandchildren, does she fade? Will they remember her warm, enveloping arms, her scent, her laugh, her lap, her love? Later in the black night, we build our big fire, beginning with Jericho's branches. I tell him that when he gathers the wood himself, that it will warm him twice, once from the work and once from the flames. He sits on his mother's lap, watching the magic show as the flames climb, the sparks fly, and the hungry fire begins. I tell him all his senses are there and involved. He can smell the smoke, see the flames, hear the crackling, feel the heat, and taste some of the ashes on his tongue. I watch him stick out his tongue and test that. I watch both of them cuddle together. I wish my girl were here, sharing this beauty with us one more time. Then I think, but she is here. She is part of our daughter. She is part of our grandson. They are both here. They are both her, and I accept that. Deciding to be happy is a decision. Will Jericho teach his own child about fire? Will these Thanksgiving Day moments last? The boy is 6. I should limit my expectations. I wonder what to be thankful for. I decide to be thankful for her, for him, and for now.
Very, very good.
Thank you. The state of my art.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Katzman. That was very good.
Thank you.
Um,
I'll find out whether anything happens good tonight when I get home.
Oh, yeah, this is anything can happen day, isn't it?
Only if maybe somebody wants to fix me up with a girl, but they did ask 14 people, so it's possible there'll be girls.
Well, we can only hope.
Such a problem.
Okay, well, thanks. And your website is
Differentslants.com, and it's one word.
differentslants.com.
Yes, sir.
Very good. So I'd like to thank Mr. Katzman, Bob Katzman, and our engineer, Troy McDonald, for making today's show possible.
Thank you, Troy.
Yeah. This show is a production of the Kenosha Writers Guild. If you have any questions or comments or wish to participate in this program, please visit KenoshaWritersGuild.com. Kenosha Writers Guild is all one word, all lowercase, and come to one of our meetings. You can get all the information about the meetings on the website. Please visit the Facebook and YouTube pages for this show, Speaking of Our Words, and feel free to leave a comment. Thanks to Dave Cole and WGT, Steve Brown and Nita Hunter, our engineer Troy McDonald, and the Kenosha Writers Guild. And thank you again very much for our guest today, Bob Katzman. And
We're celebrating words here.
this is Dave Gourdoux, and the world needs your stories. We'll see you again. Thanks for listening.